It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is What Made the Cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, so here's what you got. Jonathan Tavernari, JT's been helping us out all through the full season of walking you through college basketball. The national championship is now in the bag. Let's talk first about that. JT, when you watched that game between UConn and Michigan, I think we were all glad that that wasn't a 30-point blowout that we had seen the game prior between Michigan and Arizona. And this tournament had been chock full of blowouts. But in this case, I think that everybody got a pretty decent game. But, man, Michigan was one of the most dominant national champions that we've seen in a long time. What were your thoughts on that one?
Well, the ratings of the show definitely will go up now that we're stopped talking about the last meal for
murderers.
Electric
Yeah,
Chair
thank
guys
you. Thank you
and
for
murders.
saving us, JT.
So let's start with that. My gosh, ratings are already going up. And so, I was grateful too, Alex, because, and when we've talked about this all season long, right, with BYU, sometimes talking about the Utes, Michigan made Arizona look pedestrian, which is crazy. That is insane. And they made Arizona look like, the freshman team playing against the seniors. And it wasn't particularly close, right? So that was the first thing for me. I thought the UConn game with Illinois was, it was fine. It was a good game. I was cheering for UConn because I like Dan Hurley. I think he's wild. I think he's crazy. And when you make 3 Final Fours out of 4 years, you get to be a little crazy. You kind of, your leash is a little bit longer. And so, but again, incredible game. Obviously, Michigan pulled ahead at the end, but a fantastic game, a fantastic, Final Four, a great tournament, lots of highlights. And, but one thing is clear, the NIL and transfer portal are here to stay. And, Michigan was the proof that, if you get the right mix of players with deep pockets and a really good coach, something special can happen.
Well, let's look at Michigan and their roster construction. All 5 of their starters were transfers. I'm sure you were looking at that, JT, as we were. What do you learn from Michigan? Because everyone's going to try to copy what they did. Maybe throw UConn in there as well. What do you learn about their roster construction that in the age of NIL and transfer portal will allow you to compete at a high level and win national titles?
That I wish I was 15 years younger and 5 inches taller.
Yeah.
Because big men are about to get paid like nobody's business. Now, obviously, right, Aldai Mara and even the big man for UConn, I know he's graduating, but those guys are not a dime a dozen. You know what I mean? There's not 7-footers growing on trees right now. And so big men in the portal are going to get paid. Big man, reminds me of the Kawhi Leonard, quote from San Diego State. The board man gets paid, right? And so I think big rebounders are going to be a hot commodity in the portal. I think shooters are going to be a hot commodity in the portal. And so which coincidentally are the 2 things that BYU is desperately in need of, along with sounds like a point guard.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, we were talking about how big Texas's size was a problem for BYU. Any size during the year, and then all these teams were just so massive. You're right. There's going to be, I think, a lot of a premium put on all of those positions where it's like, hey, don't just get a guy who's pretty talented. You better have a big front. You better have even some oversized guards maybe if you're going to be able to make a deep run there. You saw the names that entered. You saw Diamande entering the transfer portal for BYU. Rob Wright III went into the transfer portal as well. Now, this doesn't preclude them from coming back to BYU. Both could potentially do that. When you write like a penned love letter to the team that you're leaving, I feel like that there might be a little bit more of a point on that. But what does BYU have to do to replace a guy like Rob Wright III? Because that was a guy who was a huge part of what BYU did this year. And there's going to be so much turnover. Your biggest names are walking out of the building, and you've got to replace those guys.
It's an interesting time in collegiate sports, especially basketball and football. And I think basketball more so because you have less players and, you have the NFL rule. that you have to stay out 3 years before the draft, and continuity in college football is huge. And so, but I will say, guys, both of you have covered the NBA. Both of you have covered the Jazz. And let's call a spade a spade. Is Robert Wright a perennial 5-10-year career guy in the NBA?
No.
And I don't think he's not. And so this is nothing new. Everybody knows this. Probably Robert Wright, is the last one to believe that, because he still has a chance to make it there. And I think that's fine. But, Robert Wright most likely won't make in the NBA in terms of having a long career. I hope I'm proven wrong, right? I mean, you always want the best for the players, but so from that perspective, if he wants to maximize the opportunity to make, NIL money, why not? And, power to him. The numbers that I am hearing are ludicrous. Like I have talked to someone that actually knows stuff, and he told me that he's hearing upwards of $3.5 million of NIL for Robert Wright. And that's not chump change, and I don't think Sundiata Gaines ever made that much for the Jazz.
There's
right?
no second-round picks in the NBA making that this year. No. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and so I think it's one of those things that you're like, my gosh, that's a lot of money. And so, as things are definitely moving and they're progressing. One of the things that I find curious is, how are you able to improve those numbers, in terms of the production of Robert Wright? And so are you going to look for a pass first point guard? Are you going to maybe look for someone that may be a secondary point guard that can, distribute the ball and maybe manage the game? But I think it's size, right? To you guys' point about length at all over the court. Robert Wright struggled with teams that packed the paint and just threw height at him. The Texas game was one. I think the UCF game. Yeah, UCF was another one that he struggled with mightily, just because those guys were super long and athletic. And so, I don't fault Robert Wright one bit. Right. I know that, I was exchanging a little bit of a text messages with Eric Mika about this, and he was like, I just don't think that's the best way for you to provide leverage, for you to be able to find a way, to ask for more money by going in the portal. And I disagree. It's the Wild West. You are completely in your right to do that. Richie Saunders did that, when Mark Pope took the Kentucky job. And so, and if Richie Saunders, who is a Cougar for life, which I want to touch on that just on a second, JJ and Alex, please.
Yep.
Then it can be okay for Robert Wright to do that. And so now this Cougar for life thing, right? I think we need to stop, and I definitely going to stop doing that, where, once a Cougar, always a Cougar. I think that's a bunch of bull crap, right? I think we have to be able to separate these things. These guys are professional athletes. These guys are getting paid a lot of money to do this. There's no loyalty in sports, and the collegiate model is completely changing. I'm not going to say it's going down the drain, because it's changing, right? But long gone are the days of the pageantry and the rivalries and the regional rivalries and the New Mexicos and the UTEPs and the Arizonas and the Colorado States and so on. This is professional sports. Let's be clear about this. So as you guys continue to have me, right, and we had a great experience and we go into next year and so on, don't expect me to sugarcoat when someone goes 0 for 11 and they're getting paid $500,000 to play at BYU, because they are now paid employees, right? It's pretty similar that we're just kind of doing this thing that, but he still needs grade to qualify, which is another travesty. But it's a different ball game, guys. There's no right and wrong. It's just the reality that we live in today.
It is a different ball game, JT, and now these programs have to approach it differently. And we'll specifically talk about BYU here, but it applies to Utah State. It applies to Utah. Roster building now in this new era. How do you do it? Because you see so many guys are leaving. You don't know what's coming back one year after the other. We know BYU's bringing in Bruce Branch, who's an All-American, McDonald's All-American 5-star kid. But we just learned that you had A.J. DeBonsa, and it got you to the first round of the tournament, and that's it. You got to surround him with a lot of good players. We've seen the model. You look at the teams that were successful in the tournament, they're old. They've got veterans. They got size. They're big. They're bullies. They're men, not boys. So how does BYU transform this roster into a roster full of men, not boys, as they try to take things to the next level? Because they have the resources and the money to do it, but you got to build it right.
Well, and JJ, look, if it was simple, anybody could do it, right? And I will say this, you are correct. They have all, as we would say in Brazil, right? You have the knife and the cheese. All you got to do is cut it now, right? And so, but one of the things that I would say is roster creation becomes imperative. As much as coaching, I'm still going to give coaching the leverage, but it is up there, man, on the importance of creating a roster. To your point, let's dissect Michigan and Arizona and UConn for that matter. You had big men. You don't have just one big man. You had multiple big men, multiple 7-footers. You had stretched the 4 guys that were 6'8", 6'9", big. You had athletic wings. You had scoring guards, and you had point guards that were effective, right? And all pretty much everybody except the big men could shoot, right? I'm going to exclude the 7-footers for just a sec. And but it's tough, man, because then, look at Michigan. When Yaxo went down for about 5 minutes of the Arizona game, they were still able to contain Arizona because they were so deep. Now, there's also the fact that they didn't have, a plethora of injuries like BYU did. But nonetheless, right, you're looking for big, strong, and athletic players. I still think, JJ, that BYU offers something that very little schools offer, which is a chance for you to get to the NBA and for you to be NBA ready. And so I personally think that is going to resonate more with All-Americans, with McDonald's All-Americans, with kids coming out of high school, than necessarily a player in the transfer portal like a Robert Wright. Now, I'm not talking about Robert Wright. I'm just talking about a high-quality player who averaged 17, 18 points a game, maybe 7 or 8 rebounds, 5 or 6 assists. Why? Because those guys most likely will be looking for a bag. They will be looking for a way to just maximize their earnings. Whereas a high school All-American, now I'm talking about your A.J. DeBonsas, Caleb Love or Wilson, the kid from North Carolina. I'm talking about, Koa Pete. I'm talking about your Cameron Boozers, right? I'm talking about those types of guys. I personally feel that in the future, BYU is going to mess around and they're going to have 2 McDonald's All-American come to Provo. And I personally see that happening before BYU is able to attract, the top 5-10 guys out of the portal and be able to get 2 or 3 of those, right? Robert Wright was going to Baylor. BYU's offer came in. It was higher than Baylor. And then, Robert Wright had a chance to come and play at BYU, and he did. Again, I don't want to throw the word out mercenary because to me, that's a very strong negative connotation of someone just looking that's better, right? I mean, a very dear friend of ours had a better offer than he was currently getting, and he completely switched professions, right? And so I think there are a lot of things for you to be able to look at that and for you to say, if someone offers me 25% or a 30% raise, what are you going to do? And so – but I think BYU is in a unique perspective because of the practice facility, because of the staff that they put together. And, I'll wrap up my comment with this. It is the biggest offseason of the Kevin Young era. They don't have returning players. They don't have anybody of substance coming back. And, it will be interesting to see what especially Justin Young, Kevin's brother, who is the GM and kind of like the recruiter, what he's going to come up with.
Well, you talk about that. Is Bruce Branch a guy who they'll build the roster around, or is it more like that's going to be one of the key cogs in a cast of characters that they don't have all the names for yet?
It's a great question, Alex. And what I would say is that I honestly think that they're probably gonna base themselves out of Bruce. But I don't think they're going to necessarily build a team around Bruce because Bruce is not that type of a player. Now, this is not a knock on Bruce, guys. I want to make sure that I'm clear about that. He is not an A.J. DeBonza type of player that you give him the ball and he's going to go get 40 points. That's not Bruce's game. being part of the Adidas family with my son's basketball team, I got to be around Bruce. I got to see him. I got to understand his game. I got to know the family. He is a complementary player. And what I mean by that is, think of an Andrei Kirilenko type of player where he is not going to go out and get 40, but he is going to be a 3-and-D slasher that will probably get you 15, 20 points a game, 7 or 8 rebounds. But it's not like he's going to be the centered focus of the offense. He's a little bit more Scotty than he is Jordan, but I think the sky's the limit for a guy like that in the NBA, right? Which is why I think the appeal of Kevin Young to McDonald's All-Americans is going to be bigger than the appeal of BYU and Kevin Young to potential portal transfers. Again, this is my opinion. For the sake of BYU, I hope I'm wrong, because they're going to have to build about 5 or 6 players this year from the portal.
Well, and we've seen the success. We were talking about the template being for the Michigan team. All their guys were transfers. For Indiana in football, the vast majority of their roster were a bunch of transfers. And if you can find those guys, if you can build them up, then that's that could be a level of success. I mean, obviously, people are going to look at the Michigan model for basketball and go, all right, we'll do that, because people are already trying to do the same thing with the football side of things as well. Jonathan Tavernari, former BYU great, and, of course, he's a great one always on our program. So, JT, thanks for hanging out with us today, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks, JT.
Word of advice, maybe let's not go back talking about convicted folks in jail and the last meal
we're talking about the food.
Eating.
JT, you need to know, true crime is one of the hottest things in the podcast world right now. We're just trying to tap into that a little bit.
We're trying to go sports,
some extra
true
cash,
crime,
maybe?
food, all at once.
Maybe we start a podcast, the 3 of us, about food, basketball, travel, and true crime.
There you go.
Yeah, well, sounds like a good idea.
They all intersect at some point. JT, we appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You bet.
Thanks, JT.
Jonathan Tavernari.